The Supreme Court took on a case looking at the trans issue in Tennessee, and Joy Reid calls the Trump administration, guess what? You'll never guess what MSNBC is calling Trump. Welcome to John Mike Keene. She's getting worse.
But the one issue that Republicans successfully exploited in this year's elections was their fear of the transgender community.
No one fears the transgender community. I know that the commercials were about the trans issue, but the trans issue is just a symbol.
Republicans spent at least, get this, $215 million on anti-trans TV ads, with the most prominent coming from the Trump campaign itself.
Even supports letting biological men compete against our girls in their sports.
The one that got the most publicity was that men were participating in female sports and that the women were getting injured because the men were in with them. So this is a social issue. It's not even about men participating in women's sports. This is about a cultural pushdown that was so strong, so brutal, so totalitarian, and so mean-spirited that average Americans feared it. The trans issue is just a symbol.
Aaron Reed, an independent journalist covering LGBTQ issues, tracked Trump campaign spending and found that they spent, more money on anti-trans ads than they did on housing, immigration, and economy ads combined. For context, in the entire 50 states, transgender adult Americans make up 0.5, not 5, 0.5% of the population, or 1.3 million Americans out of like 320 million.
That trans issue really is, it directly affects very few Americans. But the fallout, like if you talk against trans issues and suddenly you lose your job or you don't get a promotion, that's why it has more to do with free speech and the overreach of Democrats being totalitarians against normal family men, normal people. We all felt it. It was a kind of a culture war.
In fact, there are more kids who have been exposed to gun violence, estimated at 3 million.
And that's a total non sequitur, because the Republicans, we were not running on kids are being harmed. It really is that the state was overreaching and forcing you to do, say, and think things, and every American resents it. So she brings up the gun case, the idea that which, by the way, you actually have a Second Amendment right enumerated in the Constitution. And then speaking of comparing apples and oranges, here's Ketanji Brown Jackson on the Supreme Court being so wrong and so evil, it's hilarious.
As I read the statute here, the case here, the court starts off by saying that Virginia is now one of 16 states which prohibit and punish marriages on the basis of racial classifications. And when you look at the structure of that law, it looks in terms of, you can't do something that is inconsistent with your own characteristics. It's sort of the same thing. So it's interesting to me that we now have this different argument, and I wonder whether Virginia could have gotten away with what they did here by just making a classification argument the way that Tennessee is in this case.
So she just compared the issue of interracial marriage, saying that being against the trans issue is the same thing as being against interracial marriage. That in and of itself is a pretty terrible thing to say. First of all, because there's no significant difference between a black man and a white man marrying a black woman or a white woman. A man is a man, no matter what ethnicity you are. A male, biological male participating in female sports, there is a significant difference, and it's off the charts, which is why there are no biological women participating in male sports.
Targeting trans people isn't new. It is an age-old tradition, which Nazi Germany did.
Oh, she's playing the Nazi card. Here we go. MSNBC's trying to scare off a vast majority of their audience again by saying that Trump has the same position on trans issues as the Nazi Party. It just seems like these are arguments of convenience and they ought to be dismissed. But this is a really bad move for MSNBC to destroy their own audience like this.
While the Supreme Court refuses to do anything about weapons of war in schools, today they seemed inclined to uphold Tennessee's ban on gender-affirming care for minors.
And let's get back to the Nazis for a second, because the Nazis, they also wiped out religious Jews, religious conservative Christians, and Catholics. Many of them, and their numbers generally go unreported, of some of Hitler's victims. Is not MSNBC spiteful and angry at those people?
While the decision is not expected for months, a majority of the justices parroted a string of debunked talking points, all under the guise of protecting the kids, just not every kid.
Not just protecting kids, but protecting society, protecting tradition, protecting families from an overreaching state that will take your kids away. And if they identify a certain way because they're manipulated by their public school teacher, we want parental rights. And that was the overreach that the Democrat Party made, and everyone felt it, and that's why the ad was so effective. It was a symbol of Democrat, Marxist, socialist overreach in a culture war, and this is a good pushback. I'm John Mike Keene.